It was around 2:30 in the morning, when I was driving home from a weekend visit to my parents' place in the countryside, a quiet, long stretch of rural highway cutting through endless fields and forest that barely had any lights, the only illumination coming from my high beams and the occasional flicker of moonlight through the clouds. And I wasn't even tired, not really, just lulled into that strange, dreamlike state long drives at night sometimes cause, where time slows down and you start to feel like you're the only person left on the planet. And then I saw him, a man standing in the middle of the road, far ahead, unmoving, not waving or flailing or showing any signs of distress, just standing there in the center of the two-lane highway with his arms hanging loosely by his sides and his head slightly cocked, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. And my first instinct was to slow down, of course, but something about the way he stood there made my stomach twist. Not panic, not fear exactly, but dread, deep and inexplicable, and I pulled over to the side with my headlights still trained, on him about 30 yards away, and waited to see what he would do, but he didn't move, didn't even flinch when I honked once, then twice, the sound echoing weirdly in the night air like it was being swallowed up by the dark. I didn't want to get out of the car, and I told myself it wasn't safe. Maybe it was a trap, maybe someone was trying to jack my car, or worse. But after sitting there for nearly 5 minutes with the man still motionless, I decided I had to do something. So I cracked my window, leaned out a little, and shouted, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" And that's when he finally moved, just his head at first, tilting it slowly in my direction, revealing a face that didn't look injured or confused or scared, but completely blank, expressionless like a wax figure. And then he started walking toward me, not quickly or menacingly, but slowly, deliberately, each step careful, like he was counting them in his head, and I felt this overwhelming pressure in my chest, like I was underwater, something telling me to get out of there right now, and I did. I threw the car into drive and peeled out, swerving back onto the road, and not looking in my mirrors because I didn't want to see if he was chasing me or standing there watching. But about 2 miles later, just as I started to calm down, I came around a bend and slammed the brakes because there he was again. The same man, same clothes, same posture, standing in the middle of the road ahead, like he'd teleported there. And I know it makes no sense. No car could have passed me without me noticing. No human could have run that distance in that time. And yet he was there. And this time he was smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that didn't reach his eyes. And I didn't even slow down. I drove right around him, heart pounding so hard I thought I was going to pass out, and I didn't stop again until I hit the lights of the next town 30 minutes later, where I parked in a gas station lot under the fluorescent lights and sat shaking behind the wheel until dawn. And the weirdest part is that when I told a friend about it a few weeks later, she went pale and said her older brother had seen something similar in the same area 5 years earlier. Same description, same road, same late hour. And when he tried to drive past the man, his headlights flickered and his radio went haywire, playing static and whispers until he got out of the area. And I haven't driven that route again since. Not at night, not alone, not ever. I was driving back to my dorm from a friend's house a few towns over, taking the back roads because the highway was closed due to construction, and it was close to midnight, with barely any cars around, and the road winding through thick clusters of trees on either side, so dense they seemed to swallow up my headlights, and the only sound in the car was my old FM radio quietly playing a classic rock station until it just changed, the music cutting out mid-song and replaced by soft static, and something beneath it, something that sounded like whispering or maybe someone breathing directly into a microphone, and I reached for the dial, thinking maybe the signal had just dropped like it sometimes did out there. But when I turned the knob, nothing happened. It didn't switch stations, didn't change volume, didn't shut off, and when I tried to turn off the entire stereo, it stayed on, the static getting louder and the whispers starting to form words. Though they were so faint and garbled, I could only catch bits and pieces like "don't stop" and "almost here," and I know how crazy that sounds. I know how it sounds like a prank or a dream or a technical glitch, but I swear the air inside the car started to feel heavier, colder, like something had shifted, and even though the windows were up and the heater was on, My breath started fogging the windshield, like I was surrounded by winter air. I tried shutting off the engine entirely, hoping that would reset the electrical system. But even when the key was turned off and pulled out, the radio kept playing, humming with that soft, distorted voice that had started to repeat something over and over. Look back. Look back. Look back. And I swear to God, in the corner of the rearview mirror, I saw something shift in the back seat. A shape that hadn't been there before, low and hunched and barely distinguishable from shadow, and I refused to look directly at it, terrified that acknowledgement might make it real. So I turned the key, slammed on the gas, and drove faster than I ever have in my life, my hands shaking and heart hammering in my chest as the voice behind me kept whispering louder and more frantic. Look back, look back, look back, until I hit the main road again and passed under a bright overhead light at an intersection, and just like that, everything stopped. The radio snapped off mid-sentence. The pressure in the car lifted, and when I glanced in the mirror again, nothing was there, just my back seat, empty and still. And even though everything seemed normal again, I didn't stop until I was parked safely on campus, and I sat there staring at the radio, dead-airing it to make a sound, but it didn't. Not that night, not ever again. But the next morning when I got in the car, I found something I can't explain. A long, thin fingerprint smeared across the inside of the rear windshield, right where I had seen the shape move, as if someone had dragged their finger slowly across the glass while I was too scared to look. It was supposed to be a quick midnight run to clear my head after a fight with my girlfriend. Just a mindless drive through the outskirts of town and along the forested edge of Route 89, a stretch I'd taken dozens of times before. Familiar, and lonely and peaceful, but this time it felt wrong from the start. There was a kind of tension in the air, like the trees themselves were holding their breath, and as I rolled down the windows for air, I caught a strange scent that reminded me of damp soil mixed with something metallic like blood. But I pushed the thought away and just kept driving deeper into the dark, watching the yellow lines flick past and listening to the rhythmic hum of the tires against the pavement, until the car dipped down into a small hollow and my passenger side door lock clicked open all by itself. And I froze because the car was newer, no mechanical issues, and I hadn't pressed anything, and when I looked over, the door was still shut. But it was unlocked, and before I could reach across to relock it, I heard something scrape against the inside of the door like fingernails dragging along plastic from the inside, and I slammed the lock down, heart racing, jerking the wheel slightly as I sped up without thinking. But I didn't want to look directly at the seat next to me. I just kept my eyes on the road and tried to convince myself it was some kind of electrical glitch. Maybe a raccoon or something had gotten under the car and startled me. But then the radio popped on at full volume, blasting static so violently it made my ears ring, and the screen glitched, flashing random letters and numbers like a code or coordinates. And in that split second of disorientation, I felt something next to me. Not just heard it, not just sensed it, but felt it, like cold breath on the side of my neck and pressure shifting in the seat as though someone or something had settled in next to me. And finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I looked, and I swear to everything I've ever believed in, there was someone sitting there, a pale, gaunt man with a black mouth hanging slightly open, eyes like empty sockets and fingers twitching in his lap, staring ahead as if he'd been riding with me the entire time. And I screamed, nearly veering off the road. But when I blinked, he was gone. The seat empty again, radio silent, door still locked. But the imprint was there, plain as day, a deep sunken depression in the fabric like someone had just stood up from it. And when I pulled over under a gas station canopy 20 minutes later, shaken and trying to breathe, I reached over and felt the seat. It was ice cold, colder than the air, colder than anything that should exist inside a warm car in the middle of summer. And to this day, even after deep cleaning the interior, even after selling the car 6 months later, I still wake up in the middle of the night convinced I'm hearing that passenger side lock click open again in the dark. It was supposed to be a simple shortcut, one my GPS rerouted me through after a wreck shut down the main road, and I remember clearly how it said, alternate route found, 10 minutes faster. So without thinking, I clicked accept and turned, off onto a narrow gravel path I'd never seen before, even though I'd driven this stretch 100 times. But something about it immediately felt strange. The trees were too close, too tall, almost forming a tunnel overhead that blocked out the stars. And the headlights barely seemed to reach beyond a few feet, like the darkness was absorbing them. And then the radio started cutting in and out, not static this time, but random fragments of old music and what sounded like recordings of people, talking in a language I didn't recognize. And the deeper I went, the more the road started to look less like a road and more like a trail, the gravel thinning out, patches of grass peeking through, and soon it felt like I wasn't on a mapped road at all. But when I tried to turn around, the path behind me was gone. Not just obscured. Gone, like I had passed into somewhere else, entirely. And I remember gripping the wheel tighter, heart racing, my phone showing no signal, and the GPS spinning wildly in place, recalculating over and over while whispering directions that didn't make sense. In 500 feet, continue straight. In 300 feet, arrive at destination. In 700 feet, prepare to leave the body. And I swear that's what it said, word for word. And that's when I saw the silhouette in the middle of the path, a tall figure standing perfectly still, draped in what looked like soaked burlap or rough cloth, with its head tilted at an unnatural angle and hands dangling too low, almost to the knees, unmoving even as I slowed to a crawl, too terrified to drive forward. And in the moment I looked down to grab my phone, just to turn on the flashlight, the figure was suddenly gone, vanished completely, but the hood of my car buckled inward like something had jumped down onto it from above, and I heard the creaking of weight shifting directly over my windshield, though I couldn't see anything. And then the rearview mirror slowly tilted downward by itself, and in it, for just a second, I saw my own face. Only it wasn't my reflection, not really. It was my face, but twisted, smiling, with black eyes and no pupils. And then I blacked out, or maybe just lost time, because the next thing I knew I was waking up parked at the edge of the highway I had started on, engine idling, clock showing 3 hours had passed. And when I looked around, there was no gravel path, no woods, just empty road behind me and miles of silence. And to this day, when I check the GPS history, there's no record of any rerouting, no saved alternate route, and no shortcut anywhere near that location. But sometimes, late at night, I'll hear that same GPS voice whisper something from the glove compartment, even when the phone is off. In 500 feet, prepare to return.